Listed on the National Register of Historic Places, Elmwood Cemetery opened in 1872. Its beautiful grounds were designed by renowned landscape architect George Kessler, the creator of Kansas City's famed parks and boulevard system. Elmwood compasses 43 acres in the heart of Kansas City and is the final resting place for over 36,000 souls.
The mausoleum behind me is for Jacob and Ella Luce. And Jacob had founded a company by the name of the Luce Wiles Biscuit Company. The interesting part about that story, though, is that his nickname for his wife, Ella, was Sunshine. And so Luce Wiles Biscuit Company eventually grew into what it is today, Sunshine Biscuits. And another interesting part about the family story is that their mansion at about Main and Armour still exists today. And a couple by the name of Barb and Ken Satoff have lovingly restored that mansion, and it's available today for wedding receptions and special events. And so that historic treasure in its own right has been preserved as well as the story of Jacob and Ella Luce. And of course, when Jacob passed away, Ella donated the land just south of the Country Club Plaza, which today is Luce Park. Jesse here is somebody that nobody in Kansas City who's researching the history would know anything about, nor have any reason to know anything about, but he's a prime example of why cemeteries like Elmwood should be maintained and preserved. Jesse came at the age of 12 in about 1892 with a stable. No family, came with a stable operation, and he was a jockey. And he raced here in Kansas City for about 5 years before he was killed in a horse race. Fell off his horse and was trampled by some of the other horses. And so for 120 years, Jesse lied here in an unmarked grave until my wife and I came across his story when we were working on the Family History Project. And so we kind of adopted Jesse, and we put this marker up in his honor.
FYI, make sure you bring comfortable shoes. 43 acres, that's a lot of walking.
I'm standing now at the grave of Nancy Tyler Holmes, and she was the great-grandmother of President Harry Truman. One of the projects that I'm working on as a volunteer for Elmwood Cemetery is the creation of a family history project for everybody buried in the cemetery. One of the interesting parts about the Truman connection is that not only have we found President Truman's great-grandmother, but he also has over 50 of his ancestors who are buried in Elmwood Cemetery.
Can you imagine going through this cemetery and seeing a who's who of street names like Meyer, Swope, and Holmes, just to name a few? These are avenues that we all know of.
The grave behind me is that of General Samuel Bowman. He's one of over 1,500 veterans who are buried in Elmwood Cemetery, and one of over 800 Civil War soldiers who are buried here. He was a general in the Civil War. He fought at Gettysburg, but before the Civil War, he was William T. Sherman's lawyer. And then so they were good friends even after the war. And when Bowman died in 1885, General Sherman, who was living in St. Louis at the time, came to Elmwood Cemetery and delivered Bowman's eulogy. So if you go onto our website and you go into the Family History Project and you find Samuel Bowman and you click onto him, you can find a complete transcript of that eulogy that he delivered that day.
Veterans buried in the Elmwood Cemetery list all the way back to the War of 1812, Mexican War, Seminole War, and the Civil War. And you can look up that information on the website of Elmwood Cemetery Society for different wars.
We talked just a little bit ago about Heroes Way, where tributes are paid to all the Kansas City, Missouri police and firemen. And this is the marker for William Davis. And he kind of rested here in obscurity for a number of years until the Kansas City Police Historical Society did a lot of research about him. And in April of 1874, he became the first African-American police officer in Kansas City. And so about a summer ago, the Police Historical Society put this marker in tribute to him.
Many of the 36,000 people buried in the Elmwood Cemetery played a significant role in the growth and development of Kansas City. Theirs are the stories of the famous, the infamous, and the once forgotten, each of whom added their own way to the story of Kansas City.
Now of one of 12 former Kansas City mayors who are buried in Elmwood Cemetery. This was a gentleman by the name of Edward Herrick Allen. The interesting part about his story in Kansas City history, he was married to Agnes Beecher, and Agnes and her 3 sisters are also buried here, and they are all nieces of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin.
A little known fact, there are more Civil War soldiers buried in the Elmwood Cemetery than any other war. And also tragic stories like this one.
And this is the lady that killed her children.
Killed her children and then committed suicide herself.
Took her own life. And I guess that.
And the neighbors were looking for the children, and they finally broke into the house because they knew something was wrong, and found 2 of the kids in one bedroom and the other kid in another with the mother.
That's so sad. She was 38 years old.
Yeah.
And one child.
Behind me is the beautiful Armored Chapel located in the heart of Elmwood Cemetery. It was constructed in 1903 by the wife of Kirkland Brooks Armour in his memory. He had just passed away 2 years prior to that. The whole entire Armour family is buried in Elmwood Cemetery, and they had founded the Armour Meatpacking Company, which was so vital to the the growth and development of Kansas City.
Let's go inside. It's some of the most beautiful stone and woodwork. You have hand-carved cherubims and beautiful chandeliers. Now, one thing that I find a little ironic is not the fact that they have services for the dearly departed, but also weddings. You heard me right. Weddings. Now, that wooden door, now under that is the crematorium. After the services of the dearly departed, the body will be cremated. There's the light. Just kidding. Take a look around. With such a beautiful chapel, even including the bell tower, there's a lot of upkeep.
Behind me is the holding vault that was used over 100 years ago for the temporary holding of bodies before they would be transported to other parts of the country. We know that Jesse James's wife was here for a number of weeks. These buildings are part of our overall plan for restoration in the cemetery, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of work to be done. Also behind you, you can see that our mowing project isn't quite done yet. This will give you a sense of the scope of work that we have to do. This particular section of the cemetery has a lot of Civil War veterans, and we have to mow and trim this section at this time of year, and it's just an ongoing task.
A special thanks to the Elmwood Cemetery Society and Bruce Matthews for giving us a wonderful tour. If you need any further information, contact at the website below. Thank you for sharing a piece of Kansas City history, the Elmwood Cemetery.